The most expensive book that I own is S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst, the same J.J. Abrams that directed some of the Star Wars movies. So he got together with Doug Dorst and wanted to write a novel. It's like a mystery, somewhat supernatural, thriller with multiple layers of storytelling, which I really enjoyed. And I found out about this one through a House of Leaves book club discussion on Facebook. This is actually the first book that I reviewed on the channel a couple of years ago, but don't watch that review. It's terrible. Really, it's really long, and I had no idea how to review books. I was basically just going over the plot and like adding my own ideas, but like if you had never read the book, like there's so many things that would have gotten spoiled for you. So it's the first book it's the first video on the channel. If you feel like watching it, go ahead, but I'm warning you, it's garbage and it sucks. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because of how expensive it was, and it just wasn't a good book in my opinion. I gave it a 2 out of 5. And for the price point, you would expect it to be better. And I think the reason why it's so expensive, I'll get into that, because so here's a couple layers of storytelling. So the whole presentation is called S by J.J. Abrams and Doug Dorst. But this book, the actual book itself, is called Ship of Theseus by V.M. Straka, and even has a little library sticker, like a fake library sticker on it. Characters in the book, Eric and Jen, I think if I remember properly, are reading this book, Ship of Theseus. And as they're reading it, they are adding their own handwritten notes on the side, passing the book back and forth to each other in the library that exists within this book. So they pass their own notes, trying to decipher hidden meaning about who V.M. Straka is, because V.M. Straka in this world is like supposedly a part of a very secret society. People are trying to find out who the author actually is, and as Jen and Eric get closer to figuring out who this author is, they start getting followed, and their lives become endangered because people don't want anyone outside of the society to know who they are because of their intentions and whatever they're trying to plan, right? So it's, secret clubs and secret societies that that aren't supposed to exist, or people aren't supposed to know that they exist. So on its surface, it sounds like a really cool book, and I think the reason why it was $40, like retail price plus tax, so it ended up being like something like $44, which is like ridiculous. Most new hardcover books are like 30 max. Is because of all these little extra, like not only that, but like the presentation. It's like shrink wrapped when you get it, because all this, even now you can tell all this stuff is like falling out of the book, which I found really annoying. It's cool that like, all right, they give you like a little compass thing, because some parts of the book, Jen and Eric are talking about a compass, and you're like, oh, well, let me like follow along like what they're doing. But most of the time I found these little inserts that they have in here more hindering than actually helpful, because I think this compass fell out and I had no idea what page it was supposed to be on. So I just put it in the back of the book, and it would help if somewhere on here it said maybe like insert on page 45 or something. Doesn't exist. It's a great presentation. I think the only reason why I gave it a 2 instead of a 1 was because of how innovative this was. Here's like a postcard of them going to Brazil, and they send like a postcard back. So like, it's a really cool concept, but I still don't even really know how to read it. Like the way that I read it was I was reading Ship of Theseus, which is like this text in the middle, which is like an actual novel. And then after reading this page, I would read all of Eric and Jen's comments back and forth to each other about the story, trying to figure out clues and whatever. I can't even really recommend a right way to read it. I would think that's the right way to read it, but the other way to read it would be to read the entire Ship of Theseus novel and then go back and read Eric and Jen's comments. But at that point, there's a bombardment of information that goes on within this novel that is just so difficult to follow. It would have been more interesting, in my opinion, maybe to have the Ship of Theseus novel and then have Eric and Jen write like a paper or something like that you can include in the back, like a dissertation or something like that, because one of them was like a literature major, so she's kind of choosing this book on her, like her PhD or something like that. But I think it would have been of more value to have less handwritten comments on every page, because it's like every single page has comments on there. Like, look at this, look how busy this is. Like, it's cool and it's really interesting, but they're like the amount of details that they're listing, like, what about this and what about this clue? And I'm like, I couldn't keep everything straight. So this is the most expensive novel that I own at like $40 when I bought it. But my opinion, I don't think it's worth $40. If you're interested in reading this, I would say get it from the library if you can find it, because I don't even know if they would put it in a library, because of all this stuff might get lost and like stolen and all this, all these little inserts. They're not terribly important to the story, where if you don't read the daily newspaper or whatever, the Daily Pronghorn, if you don't read that, then you're not going to be, you're going to be missing out. It's just for added effect, and it's not worth $40 in my opinion. They could have done a lot to condense it. And plus the whole idea of like having a conversation back and forth, writing through a book. They're like literature majors, right? So like they're destroying property. They're destroying library property by doing that. And like eventually they meet up in real life and they have each other's phone numbers. So why would they continue to write and pass this book along after they've met? Like they've met in person, maybe let's say halfway through the book, and then they continue their conversations in the book by passing it back and forth. So they have to check it out from the library again, bring it home, look through every single page to what the other person may have commented on. And it just seems like there's not enough time to do all that, right? Like if Eric adds this, so what's the story about the day that you disappeared? And then would he ask that one question, put it back on the shelf, and then Jen comes back, oh, there's no way I can tell that story in this space here. And then she goes and puts it back on the shelf. It's like they'd have to put this book back on the shelf a million times because of all the different writings there are in here, which wouldn't be practical because all of these conversations are in like chronological order. The conversation back here wouldn't make sense up here. So they would have to have done that every single time. And it's just like, you guys have each other's phone numbers. You could be discussing this. And obviously that would break the whole point of this, of Doug Dorst and J.J. Abrams writing this book, because it's supposed to be passed back and forth. But like, I don't see the point of continuing writing in here when you could just continue the conversation in real life. So watch my video if you want. I pretty much hate on it the entire time. But don't spend $40 on this. And the reason why I thought of this is because I was at the used bookstore yesterday, and I saw it on the shelf for used for like $15, and I was like, that's more appropriate to what if I were to buy a book, like not 40. Don't buy this new at 40. Get it from the library if you can, or if you find a used copy somewhere, buy that instead. But for the price point, it's annoying to deal with because of all the inserts, and it is very confusing novel overall. I've thought about going back, not seriously, but I've thought about going back and reading just the Ship of Theseus story, just so I can get a clear view on the actual novel part of it, to see if I like that. Because back when I read it a couple of years ago, I found slightly confusing. Like I couldn't follow it. And I don't know if that was just because the story was confusing, or I just kept jumping back and forth between story and handwritten comments. But I have considered going back and maybe doing like a separate video on like, okay, here's Ship of Theseus is it actually a 2 or is it maybe like a 3 out of 5, like increasing the score? But pick it up if you want, but I wouldn't really recommend reading it. But there you go. See you guys in the next video.